Hello, everyone. Excuse me. It's Misfit Rose with Misfit Rose Tarot. Today I thought I'd do a little video on how to shuffle cards. When I was starting to learn how to do tarot, one of the things that actually was a little bit of an issue was that I never really shuffled cards before in my life. I know a lot of other people, they have had experience doing that with regular playing cards, or if they've had someone else in their life that showed them how to do that. But with me, I didn't really have anyone else to help me that knew how to do it. So I would search YouTube for different videos and different, I'd search online. And there were a couple videos that sort of helped, but ultimately, the way I learned was by watching certain tarot readers, how they held their hands, how they held their fingers when they were shuffling. And I just wanted to go over a few things that I've learned so far. I mean, I'm not perfect. There's a lot of different ways you can do this, of course. And so I'm just going to go over some basics. Now, there's different types. There's overhand shuffling, there's riffle shuffling, there's a thing called what I call washing machine shuffling. There's a type where you lay down cards and you keep making different piles and then combine the piles. It's all about finding a way that works for you, that randomizes the cards enough. And that you feel like, okay, I've done this enough. You get a sense either intuitively or you just get a sense from just the way that, when you're working with the cards, you think, okay, I've shuffled these enough. Or if you get tuned in the spirit and spirit says, okay, that's enough, then that's how much you shuffle the cards. I have several different kinds of decks here to demonstrate different types of shuffling and how I go about them. Some of them are more difficult than others to shuffle, and that's why certain techniques are better for certain cards that I've come across so far. And of course, this isn't every single way you can do, sorry. This isn't every single way you can randomize the cards, but these are some basics to get you started off. And, let's see, I have so many different cards. Let's start off with probably the one that was hardest for me to learn. And I'm just going to use one of my decks that I've used for a while. Something I'll get into in another video is the different decks that I've used as when I was still a beginner, and I still do today because I have some memory issues from my various chronic illnesses, and it really helps me with reading, sort of jarring my memory, and that are decks that have keywords. Awesome. I love these. And if you're buying them, you can get these off of Amazon, as long as you're not buying like an indie, as long as you're not buying a knockoff, you're buying, a real deal deck that's made decently. There's no reason why you can't use a keyword deck even in a regular reading, because even though I spent a lot of time studying the cards, decks with keywords and different associations and explanations actually helps me a lot when doing readings if my mind goes blank. But I don't want to get too deep into that. I know I went into a little bit. I sometimes ramble. I'm a Gemini. But I also like to think logically, too. Another aspect of my sign, air signs. But I wanted to show you one thing that was the hardest method for me was riffle shuffling. And I know that there are some tarot readers that do not riffle shuffle because they, and rightfully so, don't want to damage their cards, especially if it's a deck that is really well made and there's a chance that it could go out of print, or it's a type of deck that you love the imagery but the card stock isn't conducive to you doing riffle shuffling and you want to keep it as nice as possible. So you end up not doing riffle shuffling. You do other methods. So, but this is one method that I use. And once I learned how to do it, this has been my favorite method because I think it's the fastest way for me personally to randomize the cards. And basically how you do it is, okay, you take your deck. Okay, your deck is all together. And I have edged this deck, by the way, but I'll go into that in a little while. Anyway, you take your deck, you have it like so. Cut it in half as good as you can. If you notice the one pile is a little bit higher than the other, you can add a little bit of cards to this pile or this pile just to make it as even as possible. And you make sure it's a square, it's even and parallel as possible. Then what I like to do, one way that I learned, what's important when you're riffle shuffling is finger placement. So I have my pinky finger and my thumb. I have my pinky finger at one end, my thumb at the other end on each side. That's one thing. But actually, I'm sorry if I'm doing this a little out of order. I'm doing this on the fly today because I didn't have a lot of time, but I'm doing the best I can. And I'm sorry if my voice is a little bit hoarse. I got a bit of a cold over the weekend, but I really wanted to do some videos, so we'll just go with this. First, there's take your index finger and your middle finger, and you see these beyond the first knuckle, this flat part between the two knuckles. You put that down right there, and you also, you put your thumbs here or in the middle. Depends on if you're going to riffle it on the corner or in the middle. But let's say you do it riffle on the corner or on the, well, it doesn't matter. Put your pinkies down here. Have those fingers, holding it. I'm sorry, even I get to a point sometimes where I'm like, oh geez. Take your ring fingers and your pinky fingers. Use that to grasp the bottom. Use these two fingers, the index finger and the middle finger, bend them down, and between the two sets of knuckles, have them flat against the deck. Then have your thumbs up, pull up the deck, actually bend the deck a little bit up, and then you release. And you can either put them together like this, or if you have cardstock that will allow for it, you can try to do a bridge. If your hands are strong enough and the cards are flexible enough without becoming too warped. Another thing to mention is that, you can, when you have your thumbs on this side, they can either be in the center, or if it's too cumbersome, I found that I can even just go and put 3 fingers on the end here, 3 fingers on the end here, pinky, ring, middle on each end, thumbs on the opposite end. Put it at a little bit of an angle, like a triangle angle, a little bit like that. Put my index fingers down, and have that flat surface between your knuckles. Put that down and make it more like a V, an upside down V, and riffle it, but on the corners. Then turn it, and it's still together, it's still weaved together, and if you want to, you can just gently push it together. That's another method of riffle shuffling that I like to do because it seems like it's easier for me, for some reason, to do it that way. So I like the corner riffle a lot. Another method you could do that actually is probably easier with another deck that I have is you riffle it plus you do a bridge. And even if you do corner shuffle like this, what you do is I usually just try to straighten it out a little bit, but you just have it weaved up there. Then you go like this, you're holding with your thumbs at the top. Then while you're holding with the other fingers on the ends. Then you let go, and it sort of weaves together. Now this deck it's not as easy to do that sometimes because this is a thicker cardstock, plus it is, if you could tell, it's a little bit of a shiny coating. There's another deck that I think it's easier for me to do the bridging with. I think it's just because of the way the cardstock is. This is the One World Tarot. Not to be confused with the Next World Tarot. That's another fabulous deck, but I haven't gotten that out yet. But for this demonstration, I'm just using this one because I've already used this a few times. I have edged this with sort of a metallic-y purple color. And for some reason, Nine of Wands, which is funny because the Nine of Wands is like about persistence, even when something's difficult and hanging in there. And even if, you know, like the person's sort of like a wounded soldier, you know, the type that, you know, you've endured a lot, you're persistent, you're setting up boundaries so people don't get in the way of you taking the next step towards your goal. And that's the Wand suit, and that's all about action, creativity, passion. But, you know, I'll go over that another day. But sometimes I just ramble and I like to add that. But anyway, if you're going to do a riffle shuffle, whether you do it this way, where it's more flat and straight, or in a corner, a cardstock like this is a lot more bendable, even though it's shiny cardstock, but it's a lot more bendable. It's a thinner cardstock. And then once you bridge it, you get that satisfying bridge where you hear that, you know, that type of sound. And it's like sort of satisfying, and you know that they're all weaving together and they're coming back together. And it keeps the cards a little bit. Sometimes I find that the cards sort of keep their shape better sometimes when you bridge with, if you're doing a corner shuffle and then put it together a little bit and then you bridge, that to me is like the easiest for me to do. I'll do that again. I do the bridge. And if you find this video useful, please give me a thumbs up. Consider liking and subscribe. And thumbs up meaning give me a like. Subscribe if you want to see more content. And let's do this one more time. And also, what I was going to say is feel free to pause the video at any time if you want to do this like step by step. Like watch me do the finger placements, pause, try that, watch me do it, and just rerun it. You know, rewind and run it as much as you want. Because that's the only way that I learned, is to do that through certain videos. But there are a few videos out there, but not a lot about how to do this with tarot cards. So anyway, let's do another one where I do more of a corner riffle. I bridge it while I'm holding that with the top layer of my thumbs. Then I let go of the bottom and it weaves together. And if it's still a little bit apart, just push it together. So that's another method. The next method I'd like to discuss is, well, let me do riffling again, but with a different cardstock. I'll show you that with different shapes and types of cardstock. Here's another riffle shuffle, but this is, I don't know if you can tell at all, but this is a linen cardstock. It's more of a thicker linen cardstock, so it's a thicker deck. But this is another example of that it's a little bit easier. And I usually corner riffle it because it is such a thick deck, and then you can bridge that. That's another example. Here's a deck that's an oracle deck, slightly smaller if you wanted to bridge this. Like I said, if you want to do a corner riffle, make that upside down V. If you're doing like a regular one where it's like straight across, you do it that way. Whoops. And then you bridge it. Now, that wasn't perfect, of course. I think that for some reason, my hands and what I've gotten used to and what works for me is to do whatever size cards I'm working with. For some reason, I like to do the corner riffle. And then Oops. See, sometimes that happens too. You might go and whether you do a corner riffle or another type, a straightforward riffle shuffle, sometimes it comes out kind of chunky depending on the cardstock, and also sometimes if you don't weave them together good enough, they can end up separating like this, and then you got like a weird situation where you've got to sort of just pile them back together and start again. And I don't mind showing you that mistakes because it happens. You might have a little mistake, and if you just learn to just sort of go with it. You just don't make a comment about it, just pile them back up and do it again. And I'm going to weave these together a little better. And there we go. And one card popped out, which is interesting. Let's just see what this is. Practicality. That's funny. Because I am teaching you some practical lessons about different ways you could shuffle. And another reason I wanted to show different ways is because it depends upon how you can use your hands, the size of your hands, your mobility. If you have any mobility issues, if you have bad arthritis, if you've had broken fingers, if you have nerve damage. My husband has some broken fingers, for instance, and nerve damage. And one reason I decided to actually make this video was because of him. He said, I'm not going to be able to shuffle like the way you do, and he actually, I got him a tarot deck, and he said, I don't know how I'm never going to be able to shuffle it. And I said, well, honey, there's different ways to do it. So this is one reason I wanted to make this video, and he encouraged me to do it. So I'm doing it. Anyway, I will get to that also. Here's another type of cardstock that it depends on the type of the way that it's done, but the classical cardstock that is cards that are gilded, and this can sometimes be a tricky thing. Some people don't mind gilding at all because of the way they shuffle it or how careful they are with it, and other people are like, oh my God, this feels like it's gonna cut my hands off. It depends on the type of gilding they use. If it's a really shiny, thick coating, if it's a thinner coating, if it is, for instance, with this deck is gilded, but it's like more of a matte gilding, but it's gorgeous. It's gold gilded, and I've had this for a while, so it's not as shiny as it used to be, but it's matte gilded. So this never chips off. It's like it's if it's impregnated into the deck itself. By the way, this is the Lucid Dreams tarot deck. It's a beginner's deck again with keywords, and you're not less valid of a reader if you need to start your journey with not only learning about the cards through either reading or watching videos, but also using decks that happen to have keywords. You're not less valid of a reader for doing that. Because some people insinuate that, and I think that's wrong. It's kind of a little bit gatekeepy. But anyway, gatekeeping is when people basically say, well, you can only do it this way or that way, or it's not valid, it's not correct. And with tarot, there's more leeway than you would think. There's certain standards like that. Well, if you're learning Rider-Waite-Smith system, you learn certain definitions. You should know the basics of the cards, what they mean. If you're going to read them upright or upright in reverse, you should have some working knowledge of the cards. And if you need some help, you can have cards with keywords to jar your memory. But as far as certain ways of doing it, whether it's shuffling or even if you mix reading it intuitively or reading it strictly from the definitions, some of that is more flexible than you think. It's what works for you as a reader, and the key is no matter what you do, you're consistent. And that's how your readings will become more successful, is once you learn and once you develop and grow, if you're consistent with the definitions or how you intuitively pick up on things, and you're consistent with the way you shuffle and how you randomize things, whatever you get into a good rhythm of doing, what works for you, you'll be a successful reader no matter what. Now, anyway, this deck, because the gilding is more matte, but it does have a sheen to it, and it's like it's embedded into the card. This has not worn off, even though it is probably a little bit less. I don't even know if you can even tell that is a little bit shiny and everything, but it's like it's impregnated into. It's like it's in that cardstock, and it doesn't flake off. It's awesome. It's fantastic gilding. If you're going to have gilding, that's the best kind. It doesn't feel like it's cutting your fingers because it's on too thick or makes the card sharp. And it's also, it stays on. And I'm into either, there's very few decks where I just leave the edges completely plain, which I know is for another video if I ever want to demonstrate how I, in my particular case, how I edge cards. Again, there's many different ways you can do it. You can find a lot of videos. Boho Tarot, which I think she now calls it, she doesn't call it Boho Tarot now. I think it's through her name, Dawn Michelle Tarot. But she has a lot of great edging deck videos. But that's another video. Let's finish this. I'm so sorry. I get distracted sometimes, but I really want to do this video. Even though I'm a tiny bit under the weather, not really much. Anyway, if you have a deck that is the very shiny gilding that could sometimes be a little bit sharp on the edges, it is possible to riffle shuffle this. It is. But when it's like this, and especially when the cardstock is a little thicker or stiffer, I usually don't even try to bridge. I just gently push them together. And if you notice that they start to bow a little bit, as long as the cardstock is decent and it's, you know, it's printed very well, sometimes I just give it a little bit. I know that's like, oh, why did you do that? But another way is if it starts bending, is you can literally turn the deck around face up just to get the deck sort of more straight again, parallel. That the cards are parallel, that it's not bowing. And so that's another way. Now, if I was going to corner shuffle this, I would do the same thing. I would position my fingers. When I do corner shuffling, instead of doing the two in the middle, like I said, that are down, the index and the middle finger, I usually put, whoops, sorry about that. I usually put pinky, ring, and middle finger holding the opposite end, the end most away from you, Have the thumb middle to like more towards the top, and I have this finger here, and I put that down flat between the knuckles, and I corner riffle it. And then I just sort of gently put them I lift them up gently. And while I'm lifting them, I'm pushing them together gently, and then I can push them all the way over until they're all weaved together, and they're awesome. The next type of card I would like to do is actually the deck that I used last time. And I have worked with this a little bit. I'm not going to talk about the definitions or anything, but I just wanted to show you. This is an example. Like, this is standard size tarot deck, which is usually 2.75 inches wide by 4.75 inches tall. Most of the time. There's some publishing companies that their standard sizes might be a little bit smaller, or it might be a little bit bigger, depending on what kind of deck they're making. And here is an example of more of a mini size deck. It's not super mini, but it's more like, it's a mini size deck. It's not a regular size tarot deck. It's smaller. And I wanted to show you just quickly shuffling with a smaller deck. Doing riffle shuffling with a smaller deck. This is also a deck that I don't know if you could see, but when you see a deck and it has these, like, it looks like there's little lines going this way, going horizontally and vertically, that is usually that is like one of the greatest cardstocks because it's like it's one of the, to me it's one of the most durable and one of the easiest to shuffle. And oh, I am so sorry. Sometimes I lose my words, and I promise I'm not stupid. I'm not dumb. I just sometimes just for stuff's on the tip of my tongue, and then I remember it. This is linen cardstock. Thank you, Spirit. Linen. Thank you, Intuition. Thank you, Spirit. Thank you, Source. Oh, anyway, this is linen cardstock, but this is more of a mini deck. You could still do the same thing. You can corner shuffle it, push it together like that. You can do a regular riffle shuffle, which is more in, and actually since this is so small, I can riffle shuffle it in the corner with just, but whoops, mistakes happen. It's all right. You get into a rhythm of stuff after a while. You could also do it the regular way where it's more like vertical and parallel. You can push it together. I can try to bridge this. I was working with this deck in terms of, sometimes there's decks where no matter what kind of cardstock it is, you kind of have to break it in. You kind of have to work with it, and then it's like, it shuffles a lot easier. You have to just work with it, separate the cards, and just practice shuffling them for a while. I will try to bridge this. I will see if this works with a mini deck. It should. And like I said, I'm trying to weave these together just a little bit. Yeah, kinda. It kinda, sorta, but not really. But, there are other decks that are mini decks that will bridge too. Now this is another example going over bridging. This is a hunk of a deck. This is another deck that is a gorgeous deck that has keywords. This is another deck. This is a deck I got off Amazon. It's not an indie deck. Even if it wasn't, it's only sold on Amazon. It's a gorgeous deck. I love the art, and it's got different skin tones, different, slightly alternate depictions of the cards, but mainly it's an RWS deck. But if you compare this deck to a regular size deck, there's a definite size difference. I forget the dimensions. I don't know if this is 3x5. It may be. But let me show you how these look. Like if I put them on top of each other. See how there is a big difference. It's enough of a difference that these are quite difficult to riffle shuffle. These are ones that I end up doing a slightly different shuffle that's similar to riffle shuffling, but it's like a gentler form of riffle shuffling. And that's another way you can do this. See, for example, these are very large. And even though my hands are super tiny, these are they are so long that it's very hard to do this. And I know my fingers weren't in the best positions, but it's like I have to spread my fingers so far wide and rely on the strength of my thumbs, and it'll get to a point where I remember one time I started getting calluses trying to shuffle this, and I ended up it ends up bowing weirdly, like on the corners, and it's okay, but sometimes it's like, is that worth it? To get your cards all messed up. Now, I mean, another way you could do this, that I have done this, is when you have a big chunky deck like this and you still want to attempt to do riffle shuffling, like in a regular way, is to cut the deck in half and then riffle each half of the deck. Like this. And you still got to really spread your fingers and go, and it's still difficult, but it's possible. So that's another way to do it. I have tried it this way too, which is you're riffle shuffling it, but you're doing it from the vertical side. Like it depends on which way you're viewing the deck. But if you're viewing the deck in the way it's intended, this would be the horizontal, the shorter side. This is the longer side, the vertical side. Now, you can do something like this where it's like, and this is something to practice at, it's like a gentle riffle. It's like you're just letting the cards fall. But as you can see, it falls kind of chunky. It's sort of like you can't really weave them together like you would with a riffle shuffle where it's more even, or even if it's a little chunky, it's still weave together better. But this is something that you can hold on to it, you know, with, I have the 3 fingers on one end, farthest away from you. I have my index finger in the middle. I have my thumb here, and I just try to let the thumb gently fall away from the cards and let them fall toward the middle. And it's okay, but it is more of a chunky, gentle riffle shuffle. And this is the only real way I could shuffle this deck. I can shuffle it also hand over hand, which I will go over in a minute. I apologize if this ends up being a long video, but I wanted to show everything that I have learned so far. So that is another way to do that you can randomize it a little bit more. But it is such a big deck, sometimes it can be a little bit difficult. And I've noticed for me trying to force riffling in the way that I normally would do it, it ends up warping the cards a bit. So that's another thing. You try to avoid that if you can. So that can be an issue sometimes. I think what I want to go over next is overhand shuffling. Now, overhand shuffling, you could do that with almost any deck, and I'm going to try to show it with the decks that I've shown so far, plus a deck that is a different shape and a lot chunkier, a lot more cards. So let's start with the deck that I originally started with, which is, this has become one of my best decks that I have worked with a lot for learning purposes and to do regular readings, because there's nothing wrong with that, even though it has keywords. Especially when you're starting out or you know everything, but you don't remember. Can't remember everything. Anyway, what I was going to do is I was going to show you one method of doing overhand shuffling. Some people, like the way that you do it, and this is something also that took me a while to get. I would have to literally, because there were no specific long form videos about this is exactly how I go about doing it, and you could pause the video at any point and see how I'm gripping it, how I'm handling it. And it's not always easy to a lot of tarot readers, when they start out on YouTube, they're already either professionals, or they have already they've been doing this so long that they don't, you know, it's second nature to them. Where me, I was learning the tarot, plus trying to learn how to shuffle cards for the first time. So anyway, this is another method that what's important is how you're gripping the cards with your hands and where you're placing your fingers. There's 2 methods. There's actually multiple methods, but this is 2 of the ones that I've learned that I've become the most comfortable with, and that is you take whichever hand is your dominant hand. Okay, and that's something I should have mentioned with the other shuffling techniques. I'm right-handed, so if you are left-handed, the same thing would apply to use your dominant hand as your main grip towards whatever side of the, if you're gripping it this way or gripping it this way. It just depends upon which is your dominant hand. That would be the easiest way for you to learn, probably. At least I'm assuming. My husband's left-handed, so I will see with him if he can do this. But anyway, what I do is I grip the entire deck, and I mean you use your thumb and your other 4 fingers. There, you use the 4 from your index to your pinky, one side, grip all of the cards. And on the other side, grip your thumb. Put your thumb across the cards like this and grip them. Grip the whole thing. Then you hold your other hand like this. Like that, when you're holding it, it's like you're going to be cupping and gripping onto cards that come in your other hand. And you take your thumb and you use your thumb and you push down a little and bring the card down. And then you do it with the next card. And you could do this as slow or as fast as you want. Here's a real slow way of doing it. And like I said, if you're first starting out, it doesn't matter how long it takes you to shuffle. Whatever works for you, until you practice enough, you might be able to get to a point where you can do it fast. And I've seen readers that I really admire. They can shuffle really fast and really effectively because they've been doing this for a long time. It just takes time and practice like anything else. And here's it done a little bit faster. And that's after, practice. And also notice, while I'm holding this, I'm also, with my other hand, gripping with basically 3 fingers on the back of these. And also, my thumb is the one that pulls the cards down and holds it. And my pinky is on the other side holding that too. So it's like both sides of both hands, your fingers are gripping it and holding it so that they don't fall everywhere. And you can do it like this. And like I said, you can also do it slow. And if they start to fall a little bit, you can just push them together and you do it like this. Or you can do it fast. And if a couple cards come out together, it's all right. Because you can do overhand shuffling as many times as you're comfortable doing it. And if they start squishing apart, sliding apart, squish them back together. And you just keep doing it until you get through the whole deck. And that's that. Another way of overhand shuffling that sometimes is easier, especially with a deck that is thicker cardstock or is a chunkier deck in general, and you want to have, it's a little bit easier at first, is I would say either put anywhere from a third to a half of the deck, place it in your hand as if you had already shuffled some of it. Just take a chunk off, put it in your hand, wrap your fingers around it, hold it, still use this thumb. You already got half of the card, a third to a half of the cards in this hand. Then when you're pulling this down, it seems like it's easier to do it. Really, it is. It feels like it's a little more sturdy, stable, especially if you're starting that. So you'd start with a base of a bunch of cards that haven't been shuffled. You do this as fast or as slow as you want. And you get through it. And then once you get through it, you grab the back end of the deck that hasn't been shuffled yet. You cradle this part of the deck that was already shuffled into your hands like you did before, and then shuffle the rest of it like this. And you can also do it slow. It's up to you. The opposite way of, another way of doing this that a lot of readers do, you could do it vertically or horizontally. That's another thing I wanted to mention is if you want to do it horizontally, and you want to, take a chunk of the cards, keep them in the back so it's more sort of a stable base for you to overhand the other cards on top of, and you have a grip on them better. You do that, and you go like this, and you just do it very gently. And when you get really good at it, you can do it super fast. And both ways is also, I will go over in a minute, how people actually pick the cards, but that is the overhand shuffle. Another way sometimes people overhand shuffle, which to me is a little bit like, whoa, that's a little bit difficult, but some people do it, and they do it successfully, is you might take a little chunk of the cards that aren't shuffled, you put it in your hand, and you use your thumb to put one there, and then you drop some in the back. There, slide one into the back. So you're like shuffling them, card in the front, card in the back, card in the front, card in the back. Now this is a little bit more difficult for me, so I don't always do it like this. Usually when I get to that point where I feel like I have to randomize them a whole lot, I will combine different methods and end with riffle shuffling it and then cutting the cards and things like that. So this is one way to do it. And usually, if you're not riffle shuffling, if you want to get a good randomization, depending on what is consistent and good for you to do, what you're good at. You do have to shuffle a little bit more if you're just doing overhand. And another thing I'd like to mention is once you're done, whether you're doing overhand or riffle, once you're done, they do a thing called cutting the cards. Now, usually, you can cut the cards in as many piles as you want, but usually the standard is to cut it into thirds. So just take a small pile, do this, and then cut it again, and then you have 3 piles. Sometimes I take the piles and I'll try to, I'll move a card over so they're more even, but you don't have to do that. And then what I do is you can stack these back together in whatever order you want, but I usually take the center, stack it on the first one, and then stack this whole stack on top of that. And then you have a deck ready to be picked out in whatever way, to pick the cards in whatever way you want. I'd also like to just go over real quick. This is pretty standard for any deck, whether you're using this size deck or a little deck where it's, pocket size. And of course, then sometimes you get jumpers, which is another way that's, Okay, well, I guess with mini decks, sometimes it's easier to just do it horizontal because you have more control over it because it's a bigger surface area to grip onto. And sometimes also you'll notice some cards can be slippier than others. Not all cards that are shiny stick together, but not all cards that are satin or matte are easy to move around. And sometimes cards that are linen stock, sometimes they can be slippery too. Sometimes they aren't always a perfect shuffle. Sometimes they're slippery and you have to find a way to tilt them or grip them in a different way just so that they don't fall out of your hands. Another type of card, because I did a regular deck, mini deck, now I'm going to do the big deck. This is like the biggest deck that I have so far that is like a regular card, that they would consider a regular card. One way of doing it, I cut, the easiest way is I cut it a little bit, either in half or in a third. I hold it and grip that as much as I can. I have my thumb free, and I do it like this. And I might use the back of my hand sometimes to push them together. On the opposite hand, I might go like this, just so that I can control it. And if you do this overhand shuffling, like I said, once you're done with one part, you grab the part from behind that wasn't shuffled yet. You hold this other pile that was shuffled within your hand, grip it, have your thumb free, grip this and pull it down. And you do it as slowly as you can do it as slow as you want until you're used to it. And then you can also do it faster when you're comfortable with that. It depends on what you want to do. You can always do it slow. You can end up doing it fast, so it shuffles faster. It doesn't matter. And again, this is the same thing with cutting the deck. You would just have to be careful because these are bigger cards. And that's how I usually cut them and how I pile them up. And then you're ready once you've shuffled them, that you feel like, well, this is shuffled enough, either intuitively or if you confide in source, spirit, angels, whoever you confide in during a reading, if this is a spiritual divination thing for you, or if it's just a psychological thing, you just, some people use cards just in a psychological way, just as, doing inner work, using the archetypes to discover things about themselves and think about things. And even if you're just doing it that way, you just wait until you think, okay, those are shuffled enough. And then from that point, after they are shuffled enough, then you can go on to how are you going to pick the cards. But before I do that, I want to show one more type of deck that is not really conducive to riffle shuffling. And that is these. I love this deck. This is the Tea Leaf Oracle deck. And these actually come with a bunch of cards that are that have pictures, have a title, and have a definition. You can read these either intuitively or read more insights into each card through the guidebook. It also comes with a few different other types of cards so that you could do a specific type of spread that they outline in a book. They have months of the year, different astral houses, like, whoops, that's a month of the year, sorry. Like, for instance, different astral houses represent different things. And, this is another deck that I'm probably going to end up getting creative with. And let's say I would just pick a certain topic and say, okay, today we're going to read about how to be successful, or how, we're going to have a read about your career, or, you could do a specific layout with these different cards. But these particular, if it's a really small pile, you don't have to bother splitting them in half. You just can do that. And same thing with these. These are just the months of the year, so there's 12 cards. You can just do that. And you can do that as much as you want. But this is a chunk of cards. These are circular cards, and they're chunky. So like there's like at least 100 cards here. There's probably more. I forget the exact number. I'm sorry, but there's at least 100 cards here. So I would cut these in half. Probably I wouldn't even cut them in a third. I'd cut them in a half, because at least in a half, because you have to be able to grip to do the type of overhand shuffling I do. You have to be able to grip it with your fingers. If it's too chunky, it's like it's going to fall in your hands. But you still have to have enough room that like your thumb can grasp it and your other fingers can grasp this end too. So, and these are durable cards, but they're also thinner. This is a US Games. I think this is made by US Games. So it's thinner, but it's also durable. At least that's what's been my experience with their cardstock lately. It's thinner, but it's also it can be, sometimes it can be thin, but it feels durable. And I just do it like this. And if a few cards come out together, it's all right. It doesn't have to be perfect every time. And whoops, and you just keep doing that. And it's your choice whether you want to end up accepting those as cards that you need to look at, or you can just add them back in the pile. And I missed my place. And you just continue shuffling them. And it ends up sometimes they just start falling anyway. So when you're dealing with a big deck like this and you really want to work with it all at once, it is a little bit challenging. So you can either do this and just try to be very careful, and you might have to pick up some cards, add them, and do the thing where you broke it in half, so then you take the other half and you do this, and it can be a little bit cumbersome after a while, especially if it bugs your hands. If it's a little bit chunky for your hands, you can also cut this deck in half. Cut this deck approximately in half, and then just shuffle each particular half. And that is a lot more, it's easier to do it that way. But these decks also, what I like about these are good for if you take jumpers. But if you're shuffling and you're not done shuffling, you can put those back in the deck and just keep shuffling until you think, well, I'm done shuffling. I like to do what I would call a pre-shuffle sometimes, like shuffle the deck as much as you want. And then I'll start this side. If you want, you could start with nothing in your hands and then grip each one, or you can divide it in half like I've done before, and then grip it. Now, the issue with these cards is they're a little bit slippery. They're also a different shape. They're round. So you really have to take your time and figure out how, with my size hands, with my size fingers, how am I going to shuffle these effectively so that I can, how can I grip these and shuffle them in a way that they do randomize enough that I know I'm not going to be grabbing the same cards all the time, and it's going to affect either my divination, when I'm doing divination with these cards, or I'm just trying to do a random pull and meditate on the card. And so what I did basically was I find that with decks that are too chunky, if your hands are big enough, your fingers are long enough, you can try to overhand shuffle this all at once. But if it's too cumbersome, cut it in half and do each one. And then when you could also do it to even more randomize it is, let's say both of these have been thoroughly overhand shuffled. Then you could cut these in half again, take one half from each pile, combine that, so that's, and then you're shuffling from different piles, so you're randomizing them even more. And so you do something like that. If you, let me see. Another thing about these, I find circular cards are a little bit more difficult to deal with, but I love this particular deck, so I'm willing to deal with it. If you did want to try to riffle shuffle these, I would break these down even more, maybe into thirds, and just take a half, cut them into half as much as you can, and then grip them, and you can attempt to riffle shuffle them. But because these are a little smaller and because they're round, it's harder to grip them and do them. But you can try that too, to cut them down, break them down into little chunks, and try to grip them and practice riffle shuffling with round cards. Okay, now the next thing I wanted to do is to show you, really, just show you with a couple different decks how you can, once you've thoroughly shuffled, what do you do next? Like, how do you pick up the cards? Like, how do you pick the cards you want to do for a reading? There's different ways. One way is to accept jumpers. One way is to, just after you're thoroughly shuffled, you take cards from the top and you keep taking them from the top, and you either put them in a layout or you do it freestyle and you just lay them next to each other. You just keep taking them from the top of the deck. I'll just take this deck just so I can show this, and I might also show with this deck too. But anyway, let's just pretend these are thoroughly shuffled. And for the sake of demonstration, one way you could do this, if you're laying them out in a spread or you're just laying out freestyle, you just take each card from the top after you've thoroughly shuffled, you put the cards down, and depending on the spread, you're either going to read them individually, what they mean, or if you lay them out and it's like you're weaving a story together, you can combine different keywords or different aspects of the card, and whatever your intuition picks up on, you combine that into the message that you're trying to convey. But anyway, you're picking them up from the top of the deck and laying them down one at a time. Another way to do it, and when you do it that way, let's say you're picking from the top of the deck, okay, then you've seen sometimes readers will go and turn it around and say, oh, this is the overlying energy of the reading. Like that this isn't directly what you would get from, like if you were going to find, make a sentence out of these cards, take different aspects of the keywords, or pick up on your intuition about something about the card that really it's like, ooh, that means something significant, and you weave it together into a sentence or a story. This would be like, well, this is the overall influence of it. Like you're waiting for something. You're looking toward the horizon at new opportunities. You're waiting for things to come to fruition, whatever. And this is relating to it. So that's one way I've seen readers do it. Another way you can do it is you could, without looking at the cards, you can pull it from the bottom. Pull one card and pull them from the bottom, and either read them individually, depending on what spread you're using. Some spreads you read each card and what this particular position, what it means, and how it relates to that card. Or if you're doing a freestyle, you may pick up a certain aspect of the meaning of the card and weave it together and make a story or a sentence out of it, whatever. But that's another way, pulling it from the bottom. And sometimes even when people pull it from, whether they pull it from the bottom or the top, when you get good at it, sometimes they'll be like, well, yeah, okay, so this is the basic, this is the reading. Oh, yeah, I can see how this relates and how this relates. So, oh, wow, so this is how it relates too. sometimes they can, if they've randomized the cards well and you're used to doing readings, you could sometimes find extra meanings by looking in the back of the deck at some of the cards, the first few cards in the back of the deck, or by even splitting the deck and seeing, ooh, okay, so that's another influence on this reading. Let me see. Oh yes, another way to do this, another way to pick out cards is, now pretend these are thoroughly randomized, whether you're doing overhand, riffling, or whatever. Oh, you know what? I am so sorry. I forgot one more way to randomize cards. That there's actually two more ways. Oh my gosh. I am so sorry. I'll do this real quick. One way is to make piles. As many piles as you want. And you keep going through the deck and adding more cards to each pile. And when you are fully done going through the deck, you go through the entire deck. And let's pretend I went through the entire deck, okay? You take each pile and you randomly, to randomize them even more, after you've laid out all the cards one at a time on each pile, you have all the cards laid out. You take a pile, let's say you randomly go here, you randomly go here, you go here, sorry, go here, go here, go here, go here, and there's your deck of cards. It's all randomized, but it's a way that you can do it if you have problems with your hands, with holding your card so that you can riffle it, or holding the deck so that you can effectively overhand shuffle it, either vertically or horizontally. That is another method, is putting it into piles and keep making piles. Not keep making piles. Keep adding cards to the piles until you go through the entire deck, then stacking them up however you want, putting them all together, and that's another way of randomizing them. And you could do that with any deck. One other way is, and I'm going to show this with the mini deck just because I have limited space. This is a decent sized desk for doing card readings, but it's, it'll be easier for me to just show this way with a smaller deck. And that is washing machine style. This is another way to randomize. I like to just cut them in half, and then you just take your hands and you just do this. You move them around. You move them around. And if you notice that it's all piling up on the bottom and it's not moving much, you scrape some from the bottom, put them on the top, and you're moving them around like as if your clothes in a washing machine, and you move them around as much as you want until they're randomized, and then you gradually pick up the cards. And this method is probably the easiest. Even my kids can do this method. And sometimes it could take a minute, especially if you're not used to doing it. Like, I don't often do this, but I know I needed to demonstrate this for people that everybody has different needs. Everybody has different ways that they're comfortable doing things, or that they can physically or mentally handle doing things. And that's why I wanted to show all these methods of randomizing and shuffling the cards. There are lots. Those are some of the basic ways. Riffling, shuffling, overhand shuffling, horizontal or vertical. You can also do riffle shuffling, horizontal or vertical, but I'm better at doing that end to end like this. So we covered riffle shuffling. You can also do that with these cards. This would be another example that if you have a deck that's an odd shape, or they're for instance circular, but they're not real big circular, so it's hard to grip them and shuffle them right, you can do this also washing machine style. This particular deck also comes with a bag, like a organza bag, that you can also just put the cards in, shake it up, and just without looking, pick out a few cards. That's another way you can do it. That's valid. If you have a big enough bag, like a little baggie, organza bag, velvet bag, satin bag, whatever, and just shake up the cards that way and put them back together. These are probably going to be a lot easier to put together because they're all round and they're very easy to put together because you're not involving corners and it's a different size. And you just put them together. So that's randomizing. That's another way to randomize the cards, to shuffle them in a way so that the cards are randomized as much as you want them to be, as much as you can get them. It doesn't have to be perfect, and you will get better as you practice. So we went over riffle shuffling, overhand shuffling, different ways. Actually, riffle shuffling, bridging. Certain cards, it's easier to bridge than others. Or you can just do plain riffle shuffling. Overhand shuffling, different directions. Overhand shuffling with different types and size of cards. Washing machine shuffling, where you push the cards around as much as you want, layer them as much as, get them all mixed up like if you were doing a washing machine. Mix them all around on a flat surface, push them all together, and that's another way to randomize them. Another way, because I remember from these cards come with a organza bag that's a lot bigger than the cards, and if you can't shuffle them all, that's another way you could do it. You could put them in a bag that will not damage the cards, and you could shake it a while, and then just randomly, without looking in the bag, pick out the cards, lay them down. And that's another way to do it. So there are multiple ways you could do it. And it doesn't matter. Whatever way works for you is what's most important. Now, I was talking about, I mentioned cutting the deck. You can cut them as many times as you want, really, but usually it's 3 parts. Cut them into, you cut them into thirds. Cut them into thirds. Then you stack them back up, and this is after you've thoroughly shuffled them. Then let's talk about, real quick, how do people select cards? Now, there are different ways. One way is to physically take the deck and you just gently push them across the table as good as you can so that they're fanned out. And you can either just randomly, just whatever draws your attention, you can pick out a couple cards, whatever's sticking out, for instance, and just pick them like that. Or you can, if you're someone that feels for energy, you can go across the cards, and if you feel like sort of like hot, feel like heat or tingling, you can use that to pick out a card. Organization, that is hilarious, because this is about how to organize, how to handle, the basics of dealing with divination cards. Divination, or, if you're just doing it for, looking within psychological reasons. Anyway, so that's one method, is to physically spread out the cards in a fan, or you could, even cut the deck in half and fan it out twice and pick it like that too. And you either do it just by looking at them and see what draws your eye and picking those cards, or by feeling for energy if you do energy work, or if you have that, that sense that you work with. Let me leave this here. Another way you can pick out cards, besides spreading them out, fanning them out, again, is, taking them from the top or taking them from the bottom, flipping them over, reading them either in a spread or reading them together like a story. And these are oracle cards, so this isn't the same as a tarot deck, but I just wanted to show you an example. Another thing that I have also seen people do to pick cards or to read something is to take the deck, cut it in half, and just see what the 2 decks faced up, what it would say. So, like, for instance, this is an oral deck, empathy and authority. And you're dealing with Pisces energy, and I think that's Virgo. No, I have to look up that symbol. Wait a minute. That's not Virgo. Could be Capricorn or Leo. No, I don't know. It makes me think of Aries, or at first I'm thinking Virgo V, but Virgo looks like an M with a little like curly Q on the end. Scorpio looks like an M with a little like a little arrow devil's tail on the end, which is funny. But nothing against Scorpio or Virgo. But anyway, if you would combine the two energies of these cards, lending an empathetic ear, trusting your intuition, being kind to people, and using your position of authority to make an impact on people, for instance. That's one way to read them. And you basically split the deck and see what two cards pop up. Or you can do a thing where you cut it in multiple areas, read each card and weave them together, or read them individually. So that's another method, cutting the deck. Also, another method that I like to use, especially when I'm working with source energy, and source for different people, that can mean God, that can mean, whatever particular religion religious figure you're working with, angels, spirit guides, source energy, divine energy, whatever you call it. Say I'm shuffling them like this. What I will do is I will shuffle them, and if a card jumps out, if a card happens to fall out, sometimes I have to do this fast for this to happen. It really was starting to happen really well with the Tea Leaf Oracle deck, because that's a very slippery deck. Some decks are easier to take jumpers than others. Some it's hard. And some, like this, eventually you will get one. An innovation. That's funny. I would take this as that, you do your own thing and you're making something new out of taking different methods and making it your own. So you're very innovative. So that was interesting. That happened to jump out. And you could also do jumpers by doing it this style. It might be, wait, let me do this way. It's a little bit easier once you cut it. And you could do it this way. And you might get a jumper. This one says inheritance. This could be about you're inheriting money. You're inheriting, abilities or whatever. I mean, you could, and you could also look at pictures and figure that out intuitively. But basically, taking jumpers is another method. Let me think if there's another way people would pick out cards. So I covered, you could pick out cards by picking them after you shuffle, picking them one at a time from the top. There's also picking them one at a time from the top, picking them one at a time from the bottom or the middle. I've seen some readers that they'll take like a top card, they'll take a card from the middle, then they'll take a card from the back, and that's how they pick their cards. That's another way of, by just picking the cards out of the deck. You can also cut the deck and see what cards come up. After you cut it, just cut it wherever you intuitively feel like you should cut it and see what comes up, and that'll be another aspect to add to your reading. And then there's jumpers. And I think that is about it. I have done a lot in this video. I know this is probably going to be another long video, and I know there's a lot of readers, they wouldn't even bother with a tutorial like this. I don't even know if I consider this a tutorial. It's more of what I've learned so far, how I've learned to do it, with my abilities. Most of the time, as long as I don't get cramps in my hand because I do a lot of things every day. And sometimes if I use my hands too much, I can either get cramps in my hand or my arms. And sometimes that affects how I'm shuffling. So it's really about picking a shuffling method that works for you, and also having the knowledge of other different shuffling methods so that depending on how you're feeling physically or mentally, whatever you're able to handle on any particular day, that's the method you're going to use. And believe me, even if you work with higher energies, spirit, whether you call it spirit, divine source, divine energy, God, angels, spirit guides, ancestors, whatever if you're working with an energy type of field for the cards, whatever method you can use on that day, they're going to be okay with it. Believe me. And I just want to say thank you guys for, if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching the video. This was really aimed towards people who wanted to see different types of shuffling methods, or maybe people who are beginners and don't know how to do all these methods. And I really just wanted to add a voice, because I have not seen a lot of videos. I have not seen very many videos where they go through all the different ways of shuffling. And I'd like to mention one more thing. If you do have a particular deck that's real nice and you want to keep it nice, overhand shuffling is always going to be the safest way to do it. But if you have a deck that you really love doing it in a certain way, go for it. Do whatever shuffling, randoming method works for you, so that the cards are effectively randomized and that you're going to get a good reading out of it. And I'd just like to say thank you so much for watching. If you made it this far, or even if you just watched a part of this video, please and you liked what you saw, give me a thumbs up. It really helps any tarot readers that you watch, whether it's me or anyone else. Giving thumbs up helps with the algorithm, helps with other people videos showing up in their feed. Like if you're someone that always watches tarot videos, if you have a particular reader that gets a lot of thumbs up, they're more likely to show up in your feed randomly. And it helps them get more views, get more subs, and to be a little bit more successful in whether they're trying to make a living out of it, or if they're just trying to spread awareness, trying to help other people, and that's their main goal. Whatever your motive is, it's always good. If you like a video, like it. If you want to comment, awesome. And if you want to subscribe, I would think it would be awesome. And I just want to let you know real quick, I have a lot of videos planned. This was a little bit longer one again because I wanted to go through so many different methods. But I have some ideas planned of doing different readings for all the astrology signs, but doing my own spin on it. You know, I see a lot of readers, they do all the astrological signs, and those are some of the most popular videos, that and, you know, doing different pick-a-piles and everything. And if you have a particular preference and you want to comment down below, you're more than welcome. Or if you have a particular subject that you want me to read on, whether it's something serious or not, current events, particular person, I am open to practicing and trying and reading my best on everything. So any suggestions you make, I take seriously, I take to heart, and I consider it, and I will make a list. If people want to do requests for different types of readings, I will definitely put it down on a list and do the reading for you as I make videos. But as far as my own ideas, I have ideas on doing readings on the different astrological signs, but doing them on different themes. And I'm not going to give away all that yet. I'm going to start that soon. I'm going to do different series of different themes for readings of all the astrological signs. And just so you know, these are the astrological signs, if you don't know. You know, everything from, normally it would go from Aries to Pisces. But you can see all the different ones that are listed here. Gemini, Taurus, Aries, Taurus, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Pisces, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius. Oh, wait, Pisces comes after Aquarius. I'm sorry. But I don't know why these are randomized, but they are. But anyway, I'm going to be doing different astrological signs readings, but it's not going to be just oh, here's your weekly reading. Here is your daily reading. Once in a while, I might do a daily reading or a weekly reading for the collective, but I'm going to try out doing astrological sign readings for each sign, but a particular subject. Like, okay, we're going to do a reading based on this or on this. I'll want to keep some of that to myself. I'm still considering different options, but I'm going to start that soon. But also, if you have any requests, please post them. Please let me know on my community page when I make a post or down in the comments below. Remember to like and subscribe. I love you all. Remember, you matter. No matter what you are, no matter who you are. I love you. I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye. I'm so sorry. I have such a cough today. I'm so sorry. Bye.